And we're finally back. This is the We're Not Lost Private podcast. I'm Joe. That's Leighton. We're doing episode 5. We're going to talk about episode 1 of Band of Brothers, Currahee. Lots to unpack with that one. I know lots of people are doing retrospectives of the different episodes. We've been asked to come on the Armchair Commanders podcast and do an episode later on in another month or so. So we're looking forward to doing that. We've been getting into some things. Leighton had a interesting experience last night that he's going to talk about. You want to tease it out for everybody? I'm sure they'll get a kick out of it, especially the Band of Brothers fans.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, intentional and unintentional. Obviously a big part of episode 1 of Band of Brothers. Probably a big part, probably the biggest part of Band of Brothers as a whole, sort of I suppose, meeting an idol, if you could say that, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Don't tease. Go
Oh,
ahead. Give it to
okay.
him. Let him know. Yeah.
Yeah, Damian Lewis. Um, I think it's like what, 24 years in the making, 23 years in the making. I mean, I should have met him last year, if I'm honest, at his gig in London, but work changed that. But he was playing near me where I live. Went with a friend called Lewis, and obviously going to go down. You're going to try, take a Band of Brothers poster down and feel a bit nerdy because something I've never really done before. Although I do Currahee signings, but this is a little bit different. And yeah, I watched his gig, absolutely fantastic. Heard his new album, absolutely phenomenal. Really a showman, funny guy. Um, and I sort of linked in with the lovely lady who does the Fun with Damien fan page. I think it's the
Mhm.
title of that. So she said she'd help me out as well. So a big, huge thanks to her. We sort of met just before the show, and we met afterwards where she mentioned that she helped me out. And I gave him a challenge coin as well. We Happy Few Bastone challenge coin. But I didn't give that to him directly. I gave it to him through his drummer because he's a lovely lad and we were speaking outside in this smoking area, although I wasn't smoking. But yeah, sort of just we were just lovely guy and he took her up to him and a few minutes later he came down, and loved the coin and signed my poster, which I feel like I should retire Currahee signings now
I
because I feel like I've got,
was gonna
the big
say he's
dog.
like the unicorn to get signed, right? He's
Yeah,
the
exactly.
impossible one. I
And I did I did drop in Currahee's signing because I do again feel a bit nerdy. Obviously when you saw my poster, he's like, oh my God, you've been stalking Normandy, and I'm like, well, no, I actually do this, but um, so I did feel so yeah, it was sort of he's quite
yes,
blown away
that's
by it, which is a compliment. I mean, yeah,
yeah, it's very cool. I mean, to get to link up with him. Like I said,
yeah,
he's like the unicorn, right? Of the cast members, he's tough to get.
absolutely very tough to get. I mean, if you go to, if you ever seen him in person, if you ever go to one of his previous gigs, or if you're lucky enough, he will sign. He's a lovely guy, and like I said, his show was incredible and really enjoyed it, and to do that, I mean, I was undecided how long to stay. Had a bit of a drive to get home. I got had work today. But obviously seeing the band members and chatting to them, and they said, "Oh, Damien smokes." Obviously, I should put a little disclaimer on that one there, warning for anyone who thinks he is wholesome in that sense. Um, so I mean, I was kicking myself that I'd given up smoking. I could have had a cigarette with Damian Lewis as well. Um,
That's okay. You
s-
got to chat with him. You gave him a challenge coin. He signed your poster for
Absolutely.
you. I mean, I think you're mission complete across the board.
Oh, absolutely. Submission success.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, over the moon. I mean, like I said, Joe, I don't know if you've ever met him yourself. I mean, obviously talking about myself here, but I don't know if you've ever
No.
met him. He is incredibly nice. He's incredibly gracious. I mean, one of the things was we got told that Andrew Lincoln was in the building as well. So I don't know if you know Andrew Lincoln
Mhm.
from The Walking Dead, as he lived
No.
nearby. I know him from Teachers, a TV show, British TV show from late 90s, early 2000, and before he did The Walking Dead. And yeah, so it was quick. I didn't get to see him, but he'd been in there obviously socializing, which is completely understandable. He's just come off stage as well to fantastic show, and then there's myself and Lewis out the back. Obviously there's a few girls there as well. Wait, a small handful. It's a really small handful of people. So very lucky again that it wasn't a large crowd, and so it wouldn't have overwhelmed him in that sense. So no, like I said, it was Captain Winters. I know him from a few things. I mean, a show called Warriors. I don't know if you've ever seen that
No,
about
haven't seen
Kosovo.
that.
So we go, and it's a very different role for him. I mean, we're going a bit sidetrack here. I mean, I watched it recently, but it came out just before Band of Brothers, and it had Damian Lewis, Johan Griffith. So I don't know if you know Fantastic Four movies, a few other things as well, Black Hawk Down, Titanic, a Welsh actor whose father was my headmaster in school, and Matthew McFadden from Succession. Who did he play? Tom.
Strong cast.
Very strong. It was an excellent cast. And obviously those three were the big three characters in it. So Johan, Damian, and it's a very different Damian Lewis, but you can sort of see how he nailed Dick Winters a little bit better because obviously there's an element of soldier in. He's an officer in Warriors. So it's obviously that demeanor. Obviously, officers have that, they go through cutlery school in Sandhurst, But but I think I think it enhanced his role. And I wonder, and it made me think if he hadn't done this TV show, how different would his portrayal as Dick Winters have been as well?
Yeah, it's a legitimate
Um,
question. I think we're gonna have to get Captain Dye on at some point. The skipper,
mm,
I remember him and I think Mike Stokey were exchanging text with me or DMs or whatever. We were talking about how the officers would get segregated a little bit, so they would get a little bit. And I think Scott Gibson talked about it as well
mhm,
at the Pacific. They got a little bit different training because there's obviously a different mentality to being an officer as it is to being enlisted, and obviously much different responsibilities. And I think some of that special handling probably came across as well
yeah.
for the guys that portrayed the officers. So
Certainly
I'm glad
David.
you got a chance.
Yeah,
I'm glad you got a chance to head out there. I know you had a tight schedule and it was
yeah, very.
so
But lucky, yeah. I mean, I was very lucky. When the tickets released, I was in Bastogne of all places. And yeah, I just saw it online and I was like, oh my God, yes, yeah, he's down the road. I can go to that. Amazing, and made sure that, I mean, like I said, if normally I work from home. Well, I've been working away from home a lot, but I'm doing my military camp last week and this week. So I got a bit of a drive to get to that. So I don't want to be too tired for that either. So, but I mean, yeah, it's phenomenal. I mean, yeah, you meet the big cheese.
well,
And
we'll
I think,
try and not keep you on too long tonight, so
no, it's
so you can
fine.
get some sleep.
But yeah, it's just really Joe, still buzzing, and Lewis spoke very highly of Interaction as well. That um, his band were lovely. We spoke to members of this band outside while they were having the smoke as well, because we were nerding her up as you I hate to say it, we were nerding her up, but he came out, he was very, like I said, really nice and picked up on the accent, oh, where you from? He's got a house in Carmarthenshire, he told me. But he's obviously done a few films related to where I'm from as well. So The Baker, Dream Horse, which I've been told Freddie Joe is a big fan of that film because it's horses. He's told me. But yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But enough about Damien. Yeah, the still on a high, Joe. Still on a high. That's
Nice,
all I can
nice.
say.
My wife and I mean, we've talked about it off screen. We're going to be heading down to Toccoa on Wednesday for a couple days to link up with the All Airborne Battalion and the Currahee to Normandy effort. And several of the actors are going to be down there. Looking forward to seeing
Yeah.
quite a few of them that we haven't seen in quite some time, and then meeting a few of the others that we haven't met face to face. Put together some historical perspectives. We're going to talk Toccoa in the 506th, and I put together some stuff, some photos, and some biographical data for the guys of their vet. So if they want
Hmm.
to bring them along with them when they jump, they can
Amazing.
fit it easily into a pocket in their jump
Hmm.
jacket.
Oh,
But
brilliant.
we're looking forward to that. And Chris Langlois, one of Doc Rose's grandsons, will be down there as well. So uh, a little mini reunion of
Oh,
sorts
great
down
guy.
there. So we're looking forward to that. But
I've se- I've
I
seen
think
today that they're at Fort Benning or now
yeah, they went
Fort
down
Moore.
Fort Moore. Yeah, they've changed the name to General Moore, Harold Moore from We Were
We
Soldiers.
Were
If
Soldiers, yeah.
those of our listeners and viewers who are familiar with Fort Benning, they changed the name to Fort Moore in honor of General Moore. The Infantry Museum down there, it's excellent. If anyone gets a chance to go down there, I highly recommend it. It's really beautifully done and well set up, and I great guarantee you'll have a great time there, and you'll learn quite a bit about the United States Army and the various conflicts, and a lot of the heroes that have filled the ranks over the years. So if
Amazing.
folks have a chance, I highly recommend it. But yeah, the jump team is down there with the actors today, and um, they'll be they're getting through going through their paces with jump school right now. So
Brilliant.
good for them. I applaud their effort, and I'm looking forward to watching them come out of Placid Lassie and make some safe landings and good PLFs.
Yeah. I mean, the photos look
But
amazing. I mean, Rennie has put some photos up.
yeah,
Obviously, he put a photo up of our good friend Sean, one of Sean's artifacts from the museum, which is incredible. The
yeah,
original, Dick Winters's roster from Market Garden.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. So yeah, and obviously the photos from Alex and Christian being a photographer that he is getting some great shots as well.
Yeah,
No, it
there's
looks
some beautiful
incredible.
stuff down there, including the last remaining huts that the men stayed in, the stables
Hmm.
that the men stayed in. And if anybody doesn't know the background to that, they were basically painstakingly taken apart and flown back to the United States on a U.S. Air Force aircraft, and then reassembled in uh, uh, the Currahee Military
Hmm.
Museum in Toccoa. And you can actually go into them and see, like in one of them, Cleveland Petty, who's a assistant machine gunner in Easy's second platoon, actually
Hmm.
carved his name into the wall,
Wow.
so you can go and see that, along with all
Amazing.
the artifacts that families of the 506 have and veterans of the 506 have donated to the museum. It's really have a great time. Toccoa is a quaint little town down in Georgia. You'll enjoy yourself. Um, Good food and good time and kind of away from the hustle and bustle if that's what you're looking to do. And plus you got Atlanta a couple hours away, I think.
Yeah,
So
amazing.
if you want to go that route and get back to the big city when you're visiting.
Yeah,
But yeah, I highly recommend it. I've been
brilliant.
there at least a half a dozen times, and I've done Currahee 5 times, and I'm gonna try not to do it anymore. I think I've paid my dues with that one.
Amazing. I mean, go back
But
to Petty. I mean, we do see him in Band of Brothers as well. He is in Band of Brothers, if people
he
are not
is.
aware about, portrayed by Adam James.
Yep, yep.
So
And
obviously there's
as we work our way through the episodes, as we move towards the 80th anniversary of D-Day, we'll definitely talk about episode 2, and I think that's the one we're on tap with
Mhm.
Armchair Commanders podcast as well. So that'll be fun. But I mean, we may lose some viewers if we don't start talking about
I
episode
know,
1
yeah.
soon,
This is
right?
good chat. This is good chat.
Yeah, yeah. We're kind of just catching up after a couple weeks.
I know,
And
yeah.
again, apologies to anyone who was upset that we missed the mark and dropping the pod on Sunday. We apologize. We'll try and make up for it here. And then just a quick note, obviously, we're on Patreon. So if anybody wants to subscribe, hit like, subscribe. And if you want to become a paid member of the company, we'll have lots of extras. We dropped a bunch of stuff for Masters of the Air, and we'll be picking up steam with dropping a bunch of extras about Easy Company and the 506th and the 101st. And we'll try and get back on track with doing some other topics outside of Band of Brothers and Masters of the Air. But
Mhm.
we are a work in progress as a podcast, and you can find us obviously on YouTube, Spotify, and Buzzsprout. Just look us up at we're not Lost Private Podcast. Um, and with that said, I know we both dusted it off a little bit and cracked episode 1 on again to give it a good watch. So we were pretty fresh with it. I mean, any initial impressions about those opening scenes, the at the airfield before
On
they
a
start to
pottery.
do the flashback? Yeah,
It's a great start to the episode, isn't it? You gotta have to think about it. They're getting ready to, the Great Crusade, to start that. And I don't know, I think it's a great starting point for any episode. And let's go back in time, and then let's get up to where let's get to that point. So let's look back in Toccoa,
yeah. I
you
really
know.
enjoyed the opening dialogue between
Mm,
Winters and Nixon, talking about, like a civilized time for civilized people. Really well done. One nitpicky thing, um,
yep.
the piping on the caps, not correct. They were an
All right.
enlisted piping on them. Should have been gold braid. Um, I know that's a little bit of a stitch Nazi look at the or button counter, thread counter, whatever way you want to call it, way to look at it, but it does stick out like a sore thumb if you know what you're looking for. But it still was a very strong opening scene, and then they harken
Yeah.
back to him without saying his name, right? And
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure everybody knows who we're talking about. And then it's boom, shock and awe, right? They're
Yeah.
standing in formation, and then he hits it like an explosion, right? The guys
Yeah.
are. I thought it was just another great um, segue into that scene. It's kind of quiet. There's a bit of tension because you're waiting to board the planes, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're the
Mm.
Georgia heat in August. That you can see them, they're sweating. Um, Good job with the uniforms. They're wearing their coveralls, which is correct. That was what was worn majority of the time while they were training down there. If not those, then the very simple herringbone twill, the HBT fatigues
Mhm.
and service shoes. They had jump boots, but they were not allowed to wear them.
Yeah,
Sobel was adamant about that. But if you look at the guys, they look really good. The uniforms
yeah,
are
fantastic.
spot on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to drop a little tidbit in you. I mean, it's a little tidbit, little did you know? So obviously when they're formed up and getting inspected, and obviously you can see a lot of people around them. We see Blackie, we see, Mario Picante, but I can't remember who he's standing behind. But obviously it's a chap called one of the essays called Chris Bridgman. You might have seen him online. So Chris Bridgman was the medic from Saving Private Ryan who checks on Tom Hanks and then runs off at the end. That you didn't
There's a
know
little
that.
bit of a little
There
bit
you
of
go.
info for the fans of both.
So,
In
but
fact, if I remember correctly, and it might have been when we were talking to Matt, he talked about they filmed the whole parade sequence, and Chris actually portrays one of the other company officers, if I remember correctly. I could have been
oh,
off on that,
really? Oh, I didn't know
but
that. Was that with the drumming out,
yes, yeah,
which
that's the
obviously
parade
was.
sequence where they do the drumming out sequence, which obviously gets cut. And we talked about this a little bit with Eric when we had
Mhm.
him on to just discuss like the formative days of the miniseries, and he was unaware. And I thought it was Matt might have mentioned it, or it might have been one of the other actors that told us. I thought Spielberg did a lot of the initial directing of the first episode, and they, as a
No, I think
collective group, they were not
no,
happy with
Spielberg
the
didn't.
tone. No?
No, Spielberg was meant to have directed an episode, but I can't remember which one. But I think it became ill. Might have been eight. Um, but I think he saw the initial
The dailies.
draft date,
Yeah.
yeah, of episode one, and I think it was like, nope, do it again.
They filmed quite a bit of it, from what I understand, and they didn't like the tone. The tone
Mhm.
was too comedic.
Right. Okay.
They wanted it to be a bit more serious, although you have to have those points of levity in there to kind of break things up. And
As you know
because
yourself, service career.
that's
It's
how
it's
that's how you deal with things, the
yeah,
stress. A lot
yeah.
of people just, they like to crack wise, and that's how you relieve the stress. And I really liked where they, they're in formation and they go right into showing, and this is in the words of the men, the chicken shit, the nitpicky
Hmm.
of ness of Sobel, and how he would find the things to gig you, whether they were real or not.
Yeah,
And he goes, there's a litany of them. We won't recount them because everybody's probably seen the episode about a million times. But that was what Winters considered unnecessary.
right.
He said, basically he could have trained a fine company
Hmm.
without having to resort to chicken shit, and he still would have
Hmm.
gotten a fine product. All he did was make things worse by doing that. He made it
Do you
worse than
agree?
it had to be.
So, do you agree with that statement?
Uh, I
I'm
think
like,
I think he
that.
could have dialed down a little. I mean, me personally, having gone through Marine Corps boot camp Parris Island, South Carolina, I could tell you there was plenty of chicken shit there, but there was always a reason
Hmm.
why it was done, and I understand the reasoning. Like
Yeah,
when I watched it, I was like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like other people watch it and they're like, I don't know why he has to be like that. I'm not that
yeah.
guy
No,
because I
agreed.
I experienced something similar. The only thing, um, I agree. I didn't have a problem with a lot of it, although some of it could have been dialed down. Like the
Yeah,
making of, don't make things up. Like when he tells him to find something after they come back from the
yeah.
march.
Hmm.
Um,
That is
I
chicken shit and unnecessary. Agree, completely agree. That's
yeah, yeah.
I hate to
Um,
hate to use the word, but that's a head fuck for a lot of people.
yeah.
Um,
Sorry about the
but
language, but we don't beep
sorry,
here, folks.
that's too much editing effort. But I think the what we call the chicken shit is it's making sure you're going through things with a fine tooth comb. It's that
Yeah. Your
buddy buddy
attention to
check.
detail is where it needs
Yeah,
to be. Yeah,
yeah, that buddy
exactly.
buddy check.
Yep.
Have you checked your buddy? Who's checking you? No one. Right. You need to check each other. So, I mean, when I was in basic training in the Air Force, um, got two new shirts out of stores, ironed them, thought they were all fine. Come back one day, my locker was absolutely thrown all over my bed. And the chick, you talk about chicken shit, he'd found stickers inside that I hadn't taken out. And it's just like, oh my God, I didn't even see those, but I didn't check for those. It's looking for that fine grained detail of, if
Yeah,
you
the
miss
thing
this.
for us, it was always Irish pennants with new uniforms. The little
Mm,
strings, the little hangers
hmm
that stick out from a seam or something. Those the drill instructors loved to find those because that was
Yeah.
fun time after that. I did like when he tells everybody to go back and change into PT gear, and then there's a little
hmm
give and take in the barracks, and then they show Private White like self dropping,
hmm
and I don't think that we spent enough time talking about how many guys went through the company during that period
Yeah.
because you really they only show White, and after
hmm
that, yeah, there's a bunch of faces in the company ranks that you don't recognize, and you probably won't see them for the rest of the way, but they only give it like that one face, right?
hmm
Because I know for a fact because I pulled all the morning reports and I've done all the math, and when the company stood up on 11 October 1942, there were 115 men in the ranks. In order to get to the 148 men that jumped on D-Day, they
hmm
went through 350 troopers from August of 42
Wow.
to June of 44. They went through 350 troopers. And that's something that's just not given enough play in the miniseries. And I realize you got 20 pounds of stuff and you're trying to put in a 5-pound bag,
Yeah.
but you need to show that attrition to show how difficult it was to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
So for me, that's a little bit of a letdown, but not where it's not so much where the series suffers. It's just a
hmm
little something that sticks out to me.
Yeah, I think you want to see, because obviously that in-depth knowledge that you have, you want to see that, so Private White, was he like a composition of characters? Was he like meant to
Yeah,
represent?
he was a representative. There was no Private White in the
Yeah.
ranks, but
That was
he's
always
meant
a
to be
question for me.
representative.
Yeah.
Interestingly, there's another one called Allington. If you read through I know you have copies of his scripts. If you read for Allington, Allington was played by Dominic Cooper.
Yes.
Dominic Cooper from uh, Captain America. He plays Howard Stark. He's been in a million and one things.
hmm
Very well known face now, but he was an up and coming actor, and really you only get one glimpse of him in the miniseries, and that's in that episode 1 when Garnier is getting his plate of spaghetti. That's Dominic Cooper standing right next to
Yeah.
Frank John Hughes, and then when they turn it. And Dominguez is removing the pot, and Winters is looking out. That's Dominic Cooper's back facing the camera. So the poor guy never got really any screen time from it, but he's one of the
The
many, many talented actors who was in this
yeah.
ensemble cast. That's some of them just didn't make it.
The Adrian Brody of Band of Brothers, you could
Right,
say.
from Thin Red Line. Yeah. That
Who
poor guy,
wasn't
his whole role
Yeah.
got cut basically.
Chatting about that today in work. Absolutely chatting
Yeah.
about and about
Oh, he
how
was so pissed off if you
he
read his
was.
interviews, man. For
Yeah.
fans of Thin Red Line, um, Adrian Brody, I'm sure we all know it was. I think he played Fife. Was it Fife?
Is it Fife? Yeah, I think it might have been Fife. I can't remember now. I can't remember his character's name because very small part.
Well, apparently after Terrence Malick edited everything down, his role went from being almost a centerpiece role to
hmm
being a bit player in the ensemble, and it pissed him off.
Yeah.
Um, but
Had
I
he
mean,
come?
that's a
Had he
sacrifice
come?
you make to be in a Terrence Malick film, I
Well,
would
this is
say.
it. This is exactly the conversation. I know we're going off a bit piece here, but I mean, had he come off the back of Piano with this, first of all? I can't remember. So obviously, I think I was an Oscar-winning film. But yeah, to be a small price to pay to be part of a Terrence Malick film. You look
Yeah,
at the ensemble cast: John C. Reilly, Woody Harrelson, Kirk Acevedo, who plays
there you
Toy.
go, Joe Toy.
Um, Woody Harrelson. My gosh, like John Cusack.
Yeah, just a
Um,
massive cast, just
Massive
massive.
cast. So, and it's the same. Look at Oppenheimer. There's a huge cast because it's Christopher Nolan, and I think if you've got a fantastic story, you will get the talent regardless of the role or the exposure because you get to work with Spielberg, Terrence Malick, Christopher Nolan, etc.,
Don't
etc.,
forget
etc.
Scott
So
Grimes in
Scott
Oppenheimer.
Grimes,
Yeah,
Oppenheimer, yeah.
so
So
lots of band threads running through
yeah,
things.
Matt Damon, if you want to
Um,
throw in a Saving Private Ryan, but yeah, absolutely. So But what we do see, and it's a shame that we don't see it in episode one, is I forget his name. I should have written it down. We do see him, but we don't see what happened to him, and we don't see the impact of how dangerous it is being a paratrooper. And I think you know where I'm going with this. I
Yep.
can't think of his name for the death of me. But we do
Dietrich.
see it, Dietrich. So we
Yep.
see him at the mess table. We see him on the
Yep.
ship.
On the
We
ship
see
playing cards with Tipper. Yep.
we see him in the UK, in England. Sorry, well, UK, England. Yes, we see him in Holborn, but that's it. We never see him again. And
So one of the guys told me they did film the sequence where
yeah,
he dies during the training accident.
yeah. Matt's
And
mentioned that.
yeah, we'll get to that though. I don't want to skip over some of the stuff
Hmm.
because we were right on the cusp with the night marches, and I don't think everybody understands that those Friday night marches were very important pieces to Easy Company's training. And there's a line in episode 2 where they are maneuvering to come around Carentan for the attack, and Fox Company and E Company get separated. And Winters comes up to the front of the line, and the officers are all talking. And he mentions the officers crapping out on training. And he was specifically referring to night training. And Easy was, because of these night marches, was very comfortable operating in the dark. And Winters felt that some of the other officers could have used some more night training. Um, and again, he had a very personal relationship with Sobel and didn't really. He said it himself. He didn't give any credit to Sobel for training the company. He goes, they were that good. We would have trained them fine. They would have been fine without his nonsense. But what I do think, you have to give Sobel credit. And I
Yeah.
know Rod Stroll, and I talked to Rod Stroll. Um, he's since passed, but I talked to Rod Stroll a lot about Sobel, and he and a lot of the other guys. And again, 70 plus years in the future, they've got a lot of time to mature and think about things in a proper perspective. And a lot of the guys told me he made the company what it was. He drove them to be the best, and he also bonded them together because they all hated him. And the night marches were a unifying training element for them, in that it gave them experience of moving in the dark and operating in a company formation. And not only that, doing it in an expeditious manner, because they got to get to point A from point B. And that was the other thing. It's only touched upon by Sobel when he rants at Winters when he comes back. And he says, you let troopers disobey orders and you're late. Well, that was a big thing with him. And the night marches were not a single distance. They routinely added 2 miles to them every Friday. And then on top of it, they didn't show this in the miniseries, but he also had boxing matches um, periodically. And if you lost your boxing match, you lost your pass for the weekend. So it behooved you not to lose those things. He would play the men off of each other, him and they say Evans, but Evans is not the first sergeant all the way through Toccoa. It's actually a guy named Harvey Moorhead. And Moorhead is actually one of the first 4 enlisted men to join the company. And he later on, when they get done with jump school, he remains behind to train as a cadre member to train more paratroopers. But he ends up taking a reduction in rank to staff sergeant, and he goes to Fox Company and later fights in the Korean War. And he's captured, and he spends months as a POW, and he's tortured. He has a pretty rough life after that. But
Oh, wow.
they show Evans and Sobel as like the Mutt and Jeff of, I'm going to torture these guys. I'm going to make life difficult for them. And Stanton was his own man, but he was also a chicken shitty guy too. And a lot of the guys mentioned that to me as well. But you have the Sobel Winters confrontation, like at the end of that scene with the night march. And I thought it was really well done. But again, he tells him, you know, find some
Hmm.
infractions. And then you have Nix and Winters at breakfast, and Nix explains the methodology to him.
Hmm.
And I think Winters was smart enough to know that, but I mean, the exposition did it for the viewer, but I thought it was a really excellent way of doing so,
That's fantastic.
especially the double timing up Currahee so they could, piss in his morning coffee piece. And I love that they had the chip beef on toast. which
Did wonder what that was,
apparently
to be
was
honest with you.
the staple of their diet when they were down in Toccoa, sometimes 2 times a day.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, because it was easy to make and it was cheap.
Looks disgusting. But yet,
Uh,
I want to taste it.
it's not bad
Um,
actually.
yeah. But no, that's what Nixon says, he had was a headmaster that was like that. And he's not there to be their friend. He's there to, and I think Sobel makes a fantastic training officer or a good training officer because he's there to do a job. You're training, and this is citizens into a soldier that are going to war. And obviously, you see a lot of people on forums and they despise. And I think because me and you, we've got that background of being in the military, we understand that. And I think a lot of people in the military, I understand, certainly people I've spoken to, they understand his methodology. I've got friends who have not served and they don't understand it, why he had to be that way. And well, they're going to war. These are citizen soldiers. These are
Yeah,
guys who have, no discipline or potentially no discipline in them. He's, what you just said, instilling them. They're late, disobeyed orders, you know. Christensen, repeat that night march. Because guess what? You effed up. So your
yeah,
punishment is you're going to do it again, and I, like I said, obviously maybe Winters had a different way of teaching, maybe, and I think Winters would have been a sort of what we call they're effectively in phase one at the moment of their training.
yeah, yeah,
Obviously phase two, I think Winters would have been and is a fantastic, what I would consider a phase three instructor or person in their career. And later course where they are just as that professional development. But certainly at that phase one level, you need a Sobel for a lot of people. And certainly these days, you need that.
yeah.
Um,
I don't think people understand what was happening with the 506 at that time. They were taking people basically right off the street and turning them into soldiers. I mean, there were quite a few guys who had been in the National Guard and then augmented onto to the active duty army because they had to resign from the
mhm,
National Guard to do it. But most of them were civilians, and
mhm,
you have to weed the civilian out of people.
yep.
And the
You
thing I
break them
didn't
down.
understand, the thing I never figured out, although I got some insights into it later on, was Sobel just this exceptionally nuanced thinker who consciously was doing this, or was he doing it because that's what he thought was the right thing to do? And it wasn't, there was no subtleties to it. That was just the way he was. And the reason I think he doesn't get enough credit for it is that there's a small insight I got from Herb Seworth. Now, obviously, Herb got to the company much later in the war, but he went through jump school at Chilton Folliot, and Sobel was
Hmm.
the commanding officer at the time. And he told me, he said, I never had a bad experience with the man. He was sympathetic. He was a good commanding officer. He expected you to do your job. And when you did your job, and he treated you like an adult. And I can't tell if that's what Sobel was really like, or if that's the lesson Sobel learned after being transferred out of Easy Company.
I think I'm going to say that's what he's really like. I
A
think that's it.
nuanced thinker
I
who
think yeah, he knows exactly what he's doing. He wants them to be the best company. He wants to be this fantastic. Probably, he wants to progress through the ranks potentially. So obviously to be the best company, that is in the 506, the best paratroopers, making them elite, which, they think they are at that time, and certainly back then, before I suppose special forces, really kicked in. Um, but yeah, and I think so Sueth, I think he got that phase three element of Sobel, do your job, pass the course,
although
do what you got to do,
the
you're good
part
to
of me
go.
also I or was the his relief so sobering and so shocking to his system that it forces him to recalculate how he does things. So
Oh, yeah, good point.
and because he's long gone and he never
Hmm.
made contact with any of the other veterans till the day he died,
Yeah,
all the way till his death, we'll never know. I mean, it's one of those things that's going to
yeah.
be lost to time,
I won't
unfortunately.
I won't say his name, but obviously I know his son is out there. I mean, has anybody
Mhm.
spoken to his family about this and what his
Uh,
thoughts are?
I've exchanged a bunch of notes with his son, not in quite some time though. Uh, and and you can go and read his thoughts about his father in one of Marcus's books. Marcus
Hmm.
Brotherton, outstanding author, New York Times bestseller, friend of the pod. If you get a chance, Sobel's son did write a vignette for one of the books, and it gives some excellent insights into. I know you've read it. This
Hmm.
is more for our viewers. There's some excellent insights into his father, who he basically said was a very complicated man. And when you tell me he's a complicated man, I tend to think he is completely. Um, it's completely possible that he is that nuanced thinker.
Hmm.
Um, and that's how he approached this. I'm going to be exceptionally tough on them because I want them to be the best. And then maybe later on I'll start to take the foot
He's
off the gas
yeah.
pedal. But we never got to see that because when they got
No.
over to England later on, and we start to see this as episode one goes on, he just gets mean. He gets mean because the pressure is
Yeah.
starting to ramp up. They're getting closer and closer to what everybody knows is coming. And I don't know if that's which forced him to be the way he was later on. And he did have some failings, and guys were
Yeah.
actively working against him, and we'll talk
Yeah.
about that as we go through the rest of it. But he, right after they finish that talk where they talk about Sobel's thinking, it becomes this big training montage, right? They start going through the jump
Hmm.
training, they do the hog innards problem. Now, all this stuff is a time compression here. They do jump training while they're at Toccoa. There's a mock tower, there's a mock fuselage. They have a bunch of different things they can do. They can do some of that jump training there. Obviously, not jumping, but they're doing some of the wire work and then practicing the parachute landing falls coming out of the aircraft. The hog innards problem takes place around the Thanksgiving holiday in 1942. Um, Again, if anybody wants to see a picture of what it looked like, because there's only one to my knowledge, if you get a copy of Terry Poiser and Bill Brown's Fighting Fox Company, there is a picture of one of the 30 calibers mounted on uh, some pieces of 2x4 that are firing over the heads of the
Hmm.
men as they're crawling. And you can't see any of the things they're crawling through, but you can see the barbed wire stretched across the course, and you can see the 30 caliber firing. And as far as I know, that's the only photo that exists of the hog innards problem. Um, and that is true, by the way. They definitely did it. Obviously, it wouldn't have been in Terry's book.
Hmm.
Um, and then, of course, they go into um, I think it's Gordon. He's yelling at Ben Kaplan, and he
Yeah.
makes him go run Currahee. But it's a great vehicle to show that bonding,
Yeah.
because all of a sudden, Matt and Peter and
Hmm.
who else was with them?
Doug.
Somebody else. And Doug
Yeah.
was with them. That's right.
So
So the four horsemen take off and they go complete it, but they're
yeah.
showing that bonding, that brotherhood, which is, vital at this point because you're showing the reaction to Sobel,
Yeah.
right? The
Absolutely.
reactions to close ranks
Hmm.
to be able to deal with them because you got to lean on other people. Um, and,
Yeah.
and I
I
thought that
mean,
was excellent. Um,
excellent vehicle. I mean, obviously, I'm going to point out the editing issue with that scene where I think it's Doug. Is it Doug? Is Doug there when they're running up it? But it's certainly Matthew, Shifty, Ben. I think it
Ben,
might be Doug. Obviously, you see them, and then if you're looking behind, I think there's five of them. And then it's back to four of them. A
little continuity issue there.
little bit of continuity there. Somebody didn't do yeah. Did somebody check that guy's work? No? Okay. But no,
But
you're
I,
right. And I think it's a fantastic
yeah,
vehicle for showing that because he's going at himself. He might have failed out if it was just himself because you are fighting against yourself in a
right. And they
situation like
show
that.
that through the repeated runs, right? The guys are helping
Mhm.
each other and they're supporting each other. And I really like that. Again, they're giving you that visual representation of this is the reaction to that action, right? That's the
Hmm.
Sobel action garners you the brotherhood, the bonding building action, the bond building. And I think that was very effective. They did a beautiful job with it.
Hmm.
And of course, they go to the scene where where he and Evans toss the barracks.
Hmm.
A lot of that's true. I mean, Ed Tipper was dating a girl in Rockingham, North Carolina at the time. They were constantly writing. So the part where he takes out the stack of letters, that is completely true, completely accurate. Not sure about the prophylactic thing,
Well, they're
but
young men in
yeah,
Georgia,
yeah.
you know.
The magazine that's a correct magazine for that period. I mean, all the little nods to it, the
Hmm.
tie and all like and the
Hmm.
barracks look really good, by the way. And
Oh, fantastic.
the thing that they don't show really though is early on the camp when they got there, the camp was not anywhere near completion. Some of the barracks didn't have floors.
Hmm.
and they didn't even have bunks in them. They had cots, and the
Oh,
cots, if it rained, would just sink right into the mud. Um, but for ease of display, I mean, it's easier to show the barracks the way they were. And there's very good. I have a couple of interior shot pictures of barracks, and they look excellent. So they did a of the real barracks. So those
hmm
look really good. Um, and then you have the spaghetti incident,
hmm
which I thought was hysterical because that's absolutely correct. Um, you know, he pulled things like that. He did things
Yeah,
like that to them. So I mean, that was a great, and that was recounted by a number of the men. So that was an easy add to the script to have that
yeah.
that scene, right?
I mean, yeah, I mean, doing something like that as well, it's that sort of mind game is, yeah, well, that's spaghetti, a really good meal. So they stuff their faces. But then, like anything in any conflict, you've got to move at a moment's notice. So,
Yeah.
all right, we've
I mean,
just
and
eaten,
you know
got
what the
that thing.
training schedule is.
Hmm
You know what the training schedule is. They've told you, hey, we're gonna have
Yeah,
classroom today. It's gonna be lectures. So you're like, okay, I'm not running
yeah,
the mountain. I'm gonna pack it in.
yeah, exactly. And
They
it's just
they
that,
paid for it.
yeah, exactly. And it's that switch, the old switcheroo. It's that's what you can do. And again, it feels like it's just that thinking of him is these guys. I'm going to get these guys prepared because so you could probably tie that in to Bastogne or certainly the end of episode 5, where yeah, they're in the cinema, they're watching a film, they're all nice and cozy. Sorry, guys, we're moving, get your
Yeah,
stuff, we're going. So you could sort of tie that into a future episode of where they've got to have that reactionary change in what they thought they were doing. So yeah,
sure.
it makes you think that I yes, I am pro Sobel and how he's done things. And I think they have portrayed the soldier, the troops, the company brilliantly in their reaction to him because it's a shock to their system. They think, why is he got to be such a fucking prick? Sorry, excuse my French, but why is
Mhm.
he got to be that way? And they, what they don't realize is they are being prepared for war. They're being prepared. They're being made the best. They are creating bonds because they are bonding over God. Love to shoot. Not it's probably a bit extreme, but man,
But if
Sobel.
you think about it, though, I mean, these guys are averaging between 18 and 22, 20. Some of
Exactly.
them, there were a couple of older guys in there, but I mean, they're reacting like a teenager would a lot
Yeah,
of times. I mean, and a couple of the guys told me that, like we're immature. We're 19, 20 years old. We haven't seen
exactly.
the world. We don't, you know, he's like, we're going to react like kids react. We're going to son of a
And that's
bitch
what we
him. We're
saw.
going to, yeah. And again, the action and the reaction, you can't expect that's going to be different.
Yeah. You're in the army. You're not working in the supermarket where
Yep.
you're getting asked unrealistic things. There's a war going on. You're in the army. And I think, again, he has broken them down. It's like when, you went through boot camp. I went through boot camp. I had my head shaved, all my hair shaved off. Why? Because you're taking away, everyone looks the same,
Yeah.
you
You're taking
know?
away your individuality, your
Yeah.
civilianness. Completely understand it. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you either understand the methodology or you don't, or you're too
Mhm.
immature to understand the methodology but it works.
Yeah. And those
But
are
at
the
the end
ones
of the
who wash
day,
out.
it does work out.
Yeah,
And it
absolutely it
does
does. And
again,
you've got memories.
helps
Mhm.
creates one of the finest a fine parachute infantry company.
Exactly
Um,
that.
so after the spaghetti incident, they start showing the training, the jump training.
Mhm.
And here's a little bit of a departure from reality again, is because the officers, Sink did not want his officers being trained by the enlisted instructors at Fort Benning. So before they left Toccoa, the officers, most of them jumped, and some of the first sergeants jumped at Toccoa at Latorno Airfield, which is still in use today. But they had an accident with one of the C-47s that ran off the end of the runway, and then jump training there was halted. But by then, the majority of the regiment's officers had already made all their 5 qualifying jumps. But the rest of the unit goes to Benning, and they totally ignore the. I don't know if it was willingly ignored or if they didn't think about it. Um, but the march from Toccoa to Atlanta that the Second Battalion did 118 miles over 3 days at the beginning of December. And I don't know if anybody's been down in Georgia during December. The weather can get pretty lousy. And despite a few hours of sunshine when they first stepped off, over the course of 3 days, all it did was rain and sleet and snow on them. And it was a pretty miserable
Mhm.
existence. And the funny thing was, First Battalion got to ride the train from Toccoa to Atlanta. Second Battalion did 118 miles. Third Battalion did 136 and went right to Benning. So, I mean, um, it was a Japanese Army record that
Yep.
Sink had read about in Reader's Digest. Um, and he decided that his guys could probably beat that. Mentioned it to Strayer. Strayer said, "Okay, let's do this." And then Bob Wolverton, the Third Battalion commander, pretty much thought the same thing. So literally, right after Second Battalion broke the world record, Third Battalion broke their record. But that was a miserable existence. I think Don Malarkey talked about getting shin splints. At one point, he couldn't even get up to go to the chow line, and
Mhm.
Skip Muck went and filled up his coffee cup for him and got him some breakfast. And I think again, it shows the brotherhood of it, but I think the logistics of displaying that kind of activity would have been a little bit tough for the miniseries. But
Yeah, I think they did well in portraying. I think doing it via the night march would have been enough. And I think what would have added that to the story as well is just they might have filmed it. You know, I'll have to ask Matthew or certainly some of the guys if they did. Um, but yeah, you're not missing any. I don't think they're missing anything from it being on the cutting room floor.
no,
Um,
no. And then they roll right in the prop blast party, which I think is outstanding. Well, they did cut a
mm,
little bit of that stuff because I know several of the guys were singing. There's some stills out there, still photos
mhm.
of the guys belting out tunes up on the stage. But I think the prop blast party was really well done. I enjoyed all the banter back and forth of the guys congratulating each other, and Frank John Hughes with the countdown, drinking his beer with the wings. All really well done. Um, great looks at the uniforms look great. I think the guys were again the banter was excellent between them.
Yeah.
And it sets it up really well for the next stage, which is them heading up to Camp McCall, where they start their training. There, if 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 Toccoa was their um, middle school, then like McCall is their high school equivalent.
Mhm.
And then what's not portrayed in the miniseries is the Tennessee maneuvers, which is kind of the college level equivalent for their infantry training. But McCall is where they really take everything they learned at Sokoa and they put it in action, and they put it into action against opposition forces or OPFOR.
Mhm.
And we see quite a bit of this. But you do see some of that nervousness about
Yeah.
with Sobel in the field, some of the things that the guys noticed about him. He got a little antsy, but they would play games on him, and we'll see this later in England, how they screw around with him. But I think they did a great job of showing um, how he was not up to snuff
Mhm.
tactically. Like Winters used to say that Sobel would issue them when they were in Toccoa, when the enlisted guys got released and go back to their barracks and they could BS and hang around, or they could go
Mhm.
to the PX and buy sodas and candy bars and listen to the jukebox. The officers had to go and study the field manuals because they were given tests by Sobel. So Winter spent a lot of time hitting the FMs, as we call them over here, the field manuals, and learning his infantry tactics. So they really show his adeptness at handling that ambush, the L-shaped ambush
Mhm.
that they had the troops set up in. Whereas Sobel doesn't have an appreciation for the tactical situation because even though he's graded the material, he hasn't absorbed it like the lieutenants have.
Yeah.
And they show that it's on full display.
And again, do you think that's maybe, I hope we get this right. So yeah, like you said, we've just said then it's he's effectively he knows the answers. He's not revised it. He's not read up on it. So he's able to test them. But like I said, he's not absorbed it himself. So to that point, it's a detriment to himself. So maybe he necessarily should have held back a little bit, read up on it himself, and then issued the tests, knowing that, hey, I know the answers. I suppose gaining a foundation knowledge himself, but then he's probably rushing through training himself as well as the other guys. So it's that he's he's pushing those guys really hard. He's forgetting about himself,
Yeah.
in one sense.
And a
Um,
lot of the guys mentioned, like especially with the Friday night marches, Sobel didn't go out with them
mhm,
on a lot of them. He went on a few of them, but he never went on all of them. He expected the lieutenants to lead the
mhm,
men out and back again, and I think that begins to be reflected at McCall. And again, the scenes are very effective there. It's on full display. Winter's tactical acumen and Sobel's lack of tactical
mhm.
acumen, all in one scene, effectively portrayed. And then the carelessness of him with his 45 when he
Yeah.
starts pointing at his own guys and telling them you, and you.
Mhm.
Just another nod there
Yeah.
of
He's panicking.
carelessness.
Yeah. He's
Is
panicking. So what you
carelessness,
just
right?
said, yeah, exactly. He's
Yeah,
panicking because he probably knows that his lieutenants know more than him, and he's meant to be the CO. And so there's that element of, oh God, what have I done to myself here? What have I?
yeah,
And he's panicking like anything that, like anybody who reacts that way is
yeah. I mean,
he,
when Winters pushes back and says we're in textbook position,
mhm,
and he says deploy your troops. I mean, his immediate reaction is to push right back
mhm,
instead of saying taking that 3 second pause and going,
mhm.
you know what, he's right. He's right. We're right where we should
Yeah.
be.
And I
And
think there's that
it's
sort of jealousy, isn't it? He's clearly jealous of Winters.
well, it's an
Um,
automatic reaction too. Like he doesn't want anybody challenging his authority.
yeah.
So it's just an immediate reaction. Like again, there's no pause. There's no mental
Hmm.
pause where you sit there and assess what you're being told by your subordinate, who's clearly
Mm,
a very effective leader.
yeah. A
But to
condor
him, that's a
moment.
challenge of his authority in front of a
Yeah.
platoon of men.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love it too when the Op 4 pops up and they're all effectively killed, and you look at the faces of all the men because they know exactly what's going on. The eye rolls, the heads back, the huffing of the breath. I mean, it's all perfect, like the perfect delivery. You just see the complete
Hmm.
frustration on the part of everybody there.
Yeah.
Um,
And I get it. So and from my interpretation of what you're saying is if he had taken part in the night marches, if he had read up and been tactically aware, I mean, he could have pushed them all he wanted because they know they are with a good guy. They are with a cracking leader who is going to be there marching through the night, one who is tactically aware that they all know, who understands the situational awareness of what's going on around him in that situation. And because he's not doing that, they've lost our respect for him. They have no respect for him to a degree because he's focusing on getting them to the best. He's not focusing on himself and developing his own leadership skills, his own soldiering skills, which clearly he needed. Um, because was he National Guard before he? Am I right in that? I'm
I
trying to.
want to say it was. I'd have to go back and
I
look.
mean, I don't know his role because obviously not everyone's a soldier in the army. Yes, you are a soldier, but you're not
Yeah, I think he
necessarily
was
a
National
soldier.
Guard. I think he
So
was. But
and I think he was an accountant by
I think that
trade.
if he would have, like you said, if he would have spent the time he would have realized what Winters was saying was tactically
Hmm.
correct. Um,
But like what
but
you just said, then he didn't want to
it
be
just he
challenged
didn't want to be challenged in front of the men, and I think that was
because
a
he knew that
perfect portrayal of
yeah,
it.
because I suppose we're looking at real life imitating because he don't want to be challenged by him because he knew yeah it's an officer below him that the men clearly respect because he knows his stuff, he's read up on it, but also as well his authority is being challenged because he wants to push them and he wants to carry on pushing them, and as we see in Allborn jumping ahead with his hi ho silver down the country lane,
Well,
you
you know
know.
what's interesting, what you just said about the officers. There were some of the officers just decided I can't deal with it anymore. There were
Hmm.
quite a few officers, and they show in the next scene when Nixon is promoted up to battalion staff and Welsh arrives.
Hmm.
You, they just kind of just touch on it, but there was a hemorrhaging of officers underneath them, like because they would rather go to battalion staff. And Winters said, I always thought I owed it to the men to stay, and that's why I never left until he was basically ordered in Holland. But
Hmm.
if you look at it, there's a guy who commanded third platoon is by the name of Wally Moore. Wally was actually the first commanding officer of Easy Company. He was the first officer to check in, so he by default becomes the first commanding officer. And he soon a couple other officers, including Sobel, arrive, and they have seniority. So he is quickly downgraded to platoon leader status. But he's dearly beloved by the men in third platoon. He is an effective leader. He is personable without fraternizing, and he stays with them as long as he can. And by the time they get to England, he says, "I've had enough. I can't deal with this man anymore." And he transfers to, he requests to go on detached service and goes to the Pathfinder detachment. And he's subsequently injured in a training accident and returned to the United States without ever dropping into Europe or fighting. But
Wow.
he was beloved by the men.
Hmm.
He got to the point where he couldn't take it anymore.
Hmm.
And I never understood if it if Nixon requested the transfer or if they requested him. Like Sav Matheson, who started out as the first platoon leader, ended up becoming the regimental adjutant. He was a very talented officer. He was a by name request by sync. So I don't know if Nixon volunteered to go to battalion or if he was voluntold to go to battalion, but it's just part of that hemorrhaging of officers underneath Sobel. And Winters was literally the refused to leave because he felt such a loyalty to the men.
Yeah.
Um, but then you see Welsh show up, and Welsh becomes. I'm not saying he takes Nix's place, but he becomes a pseudo stand-in a little bit, and they become very good friends. Um, and Welsh becomes that confidant um, with Winters, that the two of them can lean on each other.
Hmm.
But then they kind of short circuit it, because then they would have gone to Tennessee maneuvers, which last almost 60 days. There were multiple iterations of it over the course of 60 days. And again, that was like their college level degree for infantry training, where they were involved in the Blue and Red Army war maneuvers. There was lots of parachute jumps during that time. There was a lot of drop in, defend, drop in, attack. They went through all kinds of different tactical scenarios, um, field problems, as they called them back then, all different iterations of it, to become very adept at doing all of these different things. And again, I know that it's 20 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. You can't put everything into it. And they showed the training at McCall, so I think they felt, hey, we've got
Hmm.
enough of the training covered.
Yeah.
It's time to move on. And then they take the train to Shanks into up to Brooklyn to go to Camp Shanks for embarkation to England. Um, and I love the voiceover of Sobel reading the letter.
Hmm.
And those are
Yeah.
real, by the way. If folks don't know that, those are real. It's a real letter, a form letter that Sobel wrote, and they added in the trooper's name. I have a couple of samples of them in my collection. They are the same letter, each and every one, on company letterhead, but with the trooper's name typed in there. It is it's an interesting view into the mindset of Herbert Sobel when you read it. Um, how he balances the need for love and support from the family so that these men can go and complete their mission, which is to take the fight
Hmm.
to the enemy. But then he ties it all up with a win glory bow on it, which I thought was a little offhanded when you think about it.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these guys just want to serve their country. They want to take care of their buddies, and they want to go home when they're done. And I don't think glory registered on it anybody's scale of I need to do this um, mission kind of thing. But it's just an interesting view. But I loved how they did the voiceover as the boys they're boarding
Yeah.
the
No, it's a lovely
Samaria to
touch.
head over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That little humanity side of him as well. Yeah, we're on the ship, and obviously, yeah, they're down in the bottom, cramped conditions.
And you get
God
the
knows how.
Lee Gott and Garnier fight and Joe Toy speech about Joe Toy Day.
Joe Toy Day,
It's
hot in
just
Africa.
some great, just some great
Mm.
dialogue in there.
So,
Um,
yeah, absolutely. So we talk about the hot in Africa scene clip. So that was our Garnier Grimes. So the trooper next to Grimes is the actor who portrayed Brad Freeman,
yep, Brian Farmer,
right?
right?
James Farmer.
James
James
Farmer.
Farmer. So that obviously, yeah, probably Brian. Yeah, he's always talking about him on Facebook.
Yeah, that's right.
But
His
he
brother or father, I
father,
can't remember.
father,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, so that is, and you will see him dotted out throughout the series. That is Brad Freeman.
Yep. And another hat tip to our friend Sean, who eventually got Brad linked up
Hmm.
with Farmer, and they
Absolutely.
had a nice Zoom call where they could
They did,
talk,
yeah.
and then I think he sent Brad his uniform,
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I think he did.
which was a really nice touch on his
Yeah, it
part.
was,
So
yeah. And I think Brad, so yeah, Brad sent James soup recipe as well.
pea soup
Pea soup might be, yeah. I remember James telling
is
me.
a special story with that.
But yeah, so that's again, that's a nice little nod
Yeah, yeah.
to that. Obviously, so Brad Freeman, but obviously I doubt I think yeah, they had these armory cards, and obviously every member of Easy Company was represented. As again, as we see when they land in England and they're going through those, obviously they arrive in Holborn. We see Holborn. Gosh, where is it? They're marching through the halls, aren't they? Is that? Gosh, I'm trying to think now.
Oh,
But
I forgot the name of it.
oh, Chilton, not Chilton. Little Coat,
Is it
Little Coat.
Martin Dickey went and visited there a couple of times, and
Uh,
he's
so
on
it's in
the
Hambledon, isn't it? Yeah, it's. I went through so the village,
yeah.
the actual
He
name of
took
the
some
village.
beautiful shots of it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
he did some really beautiful now and then's comparisons for the footage.
yeah.
But yeah, it's absolutely storybook, and that's not the only show that's ever filmed there. Apparently, they do a lot of filming there.
In
Um,
Holborn, in the real Holborn.
no, where they filmed Wallborn.
Oh, Hambledon, is the village. It's a very small village. You can literally drive through in about 30 seconds. I went through there last year and I sort of got a little video. But you can literally drive through it. So small, so small. And obviously, I know um, some of the things you see on screen, yeah, they are dotted around, but I just didn't have time to sort of go looking for them. And probably, like says Martin, I know Martin very well, and I didn't do as enough research as Martin did on that. But so talking about Allborn, so the real Allborn, Doctor Who. I don't know if you're familiar with Doctor Who over in that side of the pond, but Allborn was so when you go to Allborn, there's two things associated with that town or village: Band of Brothers, Easy Company, and Doctor Who. So obviously, when you go to one of the pubs, there's a Dalek. Hope I say it right. Um, there's a Doctor Who replica thing there. So if you type in, I think it's on YouTube. It is on YouTube. Um, Allborn Doctor Who, something like that. So obviously, where the church is, obviously you got the green in the center of the village, got the
mhm.
church, and there's like a sort of camera overview, and you'll see the church where Spears got married.
Yep.
Obviously to the left hand side and up, obviously you got the cemetery, and obviously the bench where Winters was sat when he was obviously having a moment where he met Mrs. Barnes.
Barnes's, yeah.
He was paying
Great,
respects to hers, yeah.
yeah, great stuff. And I really love the look of it. They did a great job of portraying Allborn. Um,
Yeah, it's
and the activities in it, like the playing ball and
mhm,
taking your laundry to the lady who does the laundry there. All these little nods
mhm.
to the actual place.
Yeah.
And then we got the
We,
training montage where they go through all of the
yeah.
little training episodes,
But one thing
which
we didn't
lead.
see in all, sorry, I
What's
don't,
that?
but one thing we didn't see in Albon was what was, but we didn't see the Barnes family, obviously, which had a huge impact on Dick Winters. Obviously,
Yeah,
obviously,
that's true. That's true. They
so I think
also
they,
chose to um he was seeing a wave, a
mhm,
Navy wave, Dieta Allman, that they only nod to it briefly. There's one part where you see him writing a letter, and her picture is on the desk with him. He's writing her presence would have been much greater in the original
mhm,
episode one script, but they chose not to go down that route because they had so many other things
yeah,
to deal with his personal life, and the major was definitely not. He did not want his personal life on
on screen.
display.
Yeah, I get that.
He
I mean,
was very much a technical man. He was very much a
yeah,
tactician, and he wanted this purely done as a from the view of a military officer. He did not
yeah,
want my personal life on display.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
you get that. You can see with the Masters of the Air, and I like Masters of the Air, don't get me wrong, but that portrayal of Lysandra. I think that was a huge distraction on the show, or certainly his character. So to have that, if you think about that, what that would have done to Winters, absolutely right. I think it would not tarnished his character, but it had taken a little bit of focus away from him as a leader, as a tactician, as this, he's all about the
Yeah,
men, and I think
without a doubt. I mean,
yeah, excluding that's absolutely completely the correct decision, in my
I think,
opinion.
and as they start to work through all the training problems at Allborn, you start to see his relationship with Sobel come to a head. I mean,
Hmm.
there's some really effective storytelling in this part of it. I mean, and it kind of starts on a funny note, right? With the Luz
Hmm.
impersonation of Ollie Horton, which, by the way, is completely true for all of our listeners and viewers. Although it happened at night, and obviously it wouldn't have been as effective if they did it at night
Hmm.
in terms of displaying it on screen. So I really I did enjoy it. I have Robert Rader's notes about the incident, and he said they were not taking cover behind a copse of trees. It was a march,
Hmm.
and the front of the column got up to the fence. And he couldn't see his hand in front of him, his face, never mind somebody screaming at him from the back of the column. So when the real George Luz delivers the line, he just, yes, sir, and gets out the wire cutters and cuts the fence. And then it somewhat goes down the way they showed it with the Phil McKee playing Bob Strayer, um, telling him that Horton was in London, which he was. So I mean, all of that is true. But Sobel decides to take out his revenge not on the men, but on Winners, because Winners goes and takes the objective, right?
Hmm.
To get to that T intersection, he only has the single platoon. He breaks them down into squads and sections, and he basically cuts the road from both directions and does what the whole company should have done. And then Sobel comes running up with the balance of first platoon and of the company with first platoon, and that really sets them on a collision course at that point, right? I mean,
Hmm.
he feels like he's being directly challenged, and he doesn't know which enlisted man did it, so he's immediately going to go after the most popular officer,
Yeah.
which is Winners, and the whole thing with the um, inspecting latrines. A guy named Jackie Mello, who was a member of Second Platoon, was given the duty of cleaning all the latrines. And Winters went and inspected them, and he said Mello did a heck of a job. He was totally trashed. His uniform was a mess, but he cleaned the heck out of the latrines. This is Winters' personal notes. And then you see the interaction between them at the headquarters, and a lot of that is directly based on Winters' memories, the dialogue. And I have a copy of the paper, the slip of paper, the court-martial paper
Hmm.
that Evans gave Winters. I have a copy of it, and it's actually not a single piece. There's like 4 or 5 pieces because it's a correspondence that goes back and forth between Winters and Sobel before there's a face-to-face confrontation.
Oh, wow.
Like Winters is so pissed off at him, he won't meet with him at first. He's like, "I'm going to do this all by correspondence."
Hmm.
And then basically on the last one, when he says, "What's your excuse for not executing the latrine inspection on time?" He says, "No excuse." And it basically he's getting the last bite of the sandwich.
Hmm.
And then he finally goes in to meet with him and he says, "I want trial by court martial," and he endorses it. And that really sends shock waves through the battalion because everybody knows he's one of the finest officers in the
Hmm.
battalion. And we see that displayed when the non-coms meet up. Um, there's a bit of dramatic licensing done with that meeting
Yeah.
because I talked to a number of the NCOs in the company and they said we never sat down and discussed anything. It was really the platoon sergeants that were the ringleader. And when I say the platoon sergeants, I mean first platoon and third platoon. It was Mike Ranney and it
Hmm.
was Terrence Salty Harris. James Dial, who was the platoon sergeant for second platoon, wouldn't have anything to do with it. He was too much into good order and discipline. He wasn't going to upset the apple cart. His mind was, it will work out.
Hmm.
Winters is a good man. Will work out. But Ranney and Harris press the issue. And the scene where they're scolded by Sink is off a little bit too, because he doesn't kick Harris out of the regiment. In fact, Harris goes to B Company and he's busted and goes to B Company, and Ranny is busted and he goes to Item Company. And then Wally Moore finds them and says, "Why don't you come over to the Pathfinder detachment? You can work for me."
Hmm.
And the both of them go to the Pathfinder detachment. Harris stays with the Pathfinder detachment and
Hmm.
jumps with them on D-Day, and then rejoins B Company during the assault on Carentan, and he's killed by a German sniper. Ranny spends his time in England before D-Day with the Pathfinder detachment, and then decides, if I'm going into combat, I'm going to go with the guys I love and trust.
Hmm.
And by then, the whole thing with Winters is blown over, and Sobel has been transferred, and he goes to Winters and requests to be added back to the company. And now Winters is not the XO anymore either. He's just a platoon leader. And he goes to me and basically says, Randy's a good man. We could definitely use him. And they transfer him back into E Company right under the nose of Sink, who doesn't stop the transfer. Because all the transfers route through Service Company before
Yeah.
they come back. So he would have gone from Item to the detached service at Pathfinder Detachment to Service Company back down to E Company. So it flies completely under the radar because you're a colonel commanding a regiment. You're not going to sit there and look at every piece of paperwork that
Yeah.
goes on. So it's easy for it to happen. But what happens is Sink and Strayer both know that there's something rotten going on because they know Winter's quality. But they do know, like we've talked about, Sobel's a tireless trainer of men. And he makes the decision to send him to Chilton Foliot. But what he first does is Chilton Foliot is not at the parachute school at Chilton Foliot is not a permanent position. It's a detached service. It's like Pathfinder duty. So he transfers him to the regimental headquarters where he becomes the regimental S4. And we see a nod to this in the Market Garden episode, in the replacements episode. But he's then put on detached service at Chilton Foliot. And that's where he remains until just before D-Day. And he's brought back to the regiment. And he eventually lands, does not jump. There's a lot of people who think that he jumped. He did not jump. He landed with the Seaborn equipment on Utah Beach. Came ashore with all of the follow-on equipment. And then eventually the photographic evidence, at least it appears to be him outside of Carentan in a Time Life photo. But he never jumped on D-Day. He landed with the Seaborn elements. But this effectively clears the way for Meehan to take over the company. And it's an excellent portrayal. Jason O'Mara does a fine job with very limited screen time
Hmm.
portraying Meehan's qualities. And I've been blessed to have a long relationship with the Meehan family. They're wonderful people. And Thomas has a great backstory all his own. People tend to look at the letters that he wrote because they're on
Hmm.
the net and people can see them, especially the Dearest Anne letter, the D-Day
Yeah.
letter. But to understand them, I usually tell these on my tours that I lead every year when I take my tour groups back to Europe, and we go to Bezaville, Upland, to the monument and the crash field. And Tom came from a family they were fairly well off. And he originally had started in the cavalry corps, the cavalry, and requested parachute duty and came down to Toccoa with the rest of the 506 and then moved on and went through the rest of their training with them. And there are letters back and forth between him and his mother pressuring him to allow her to talk to their senator to have him pulled out of the 506 and placed in something a little bit safer. And he resists this terribly. He's like, basically goes to his mom in one of the last letters he sends back to her and says, "You'd be interfering in my life decisions."
Hmm.
Now, mind you, that I think he was 24 at the time. I mean, the amount of self-awareness at that age and doggedness and dedication to your duty, just amazing. And then to couple it with the letters we see him write his wife about taking the best company in the world into Europe, and um, those very few lines to his wife. I thought the Meehan character, I thought Jason did a great job, and I love talking about Meehan. I'm sure you can get that from
No, absolutely, yeah,
from all that.
absolutely.
Just
No, it's
just
really
um,
interesting.
just another amazing man who made up the ranks of the 506th. Um, but Don Malarkey said it best. He said, "Under Meehan, we became a normal company."
Hmm.
He treated them like men. When
Yeah.
they trained well,
Yeah.
and he did not have to come down on them. He didn't have to play the chicken shit game.
Hmm.
He said it, I have the best company in the world. And I'm sure, as self-aware as he was, he knew he didn't make them that way. They were
Hmm.
already that way when he got them. So some really
Yeah.
great stuff. And then to watch him and Damian work out the flight distance and where the probable drop zone is, also some great stuff there.
Yeah.
All the stuff when they finally go to a pottery, and his exchanges with Buck, which was a real thing about the gambling. Even though Buck said he never gambled, he said he was just standing on the outside of the circle of craps players. But and Buck told me that, and I said, yeah, if he says it, I believe it. But
Mm.
it was fraternizing in Winter's mind,
Yeah. Too
and he
close.
never got written up. He got a verbal
Yeah.
admonishment. It was you can't do that kind of thing, and it gives you an insight into the way Winters thinks about the men and what his job is.
Hmm.
And
You're going to send these men. You're going to be sending these men to their death in some
exactly,
cases, and
you can't
how can you?
hesitate because you
You
have
can't have. Yeah.
feelings about them,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Not you. You can go. Yeah. You can stay. Let's keep you behind. But you're a prick. Go on. But
And
it stops that from happening. And you're right. It's just so obviously you do get close to your guys. Officers do. You sort of build up a relationship, but and I say a lot of the good ones, they have that professional wall. You go too far with it, you get told that, whoa, whoa. But and I think, yeah, you probably could say, yeah, fraternizing, getting a bit too close because at the end of the day, you're their boss. You've got to tell them to do things that they're not going to want to do. And sadly, that's what has to happen. But no, it's another great scene and a nice introduction to Buck and how Buck is as an officer as well. That he is one of the guys. He's a cracking officer. He's well respected.
oh
Same
yeah,
with Meehan. And I think the whole episode is a fantastic little bit of character development of the ones of who we are going to see. We see Malarkey as, like says, we see the little, the little cheekiness about him, and I love the Malarkey character. I think he is probably the best character or person in that show, other than say Damian Lewis, but in terms of that character development, or that, yeah, that character development. Because we see Damian Lewis, we see him as a leader, we see him grow as a leader. He's always been a good leader, and we see him continue to be that leader that he is. But with Malarkey, and this is what I think with Malarkey is, we see him as this young, naive, eager trooper. And as the series goes on, we see him growing all the time, growing. And I think we see that through to episode 7, where he's with Buck, right? Reading the letter about was it the letter from his was it his mother? Or certainly anyway, the letter about how UCLA were doing. And I think Neil McDonough went to that university as well, or college.
Syracuse. Neil went to
Oh,
Syracuse.
oh, did he go to Syracuse? Did he?
Yeah, but
Um,
he was a baseball player, and that's why he and Buck, the real Buck,
mhm.
connected on so many levels.
Oh,
And
really?
Neil is just a fantastic
Oh,
guy.
he's amazing.
And
He is one of the
you
nicest
know,
guys I've ever met.
I completely agree with you. Scott's performance is so good. It's so
Mhm.
nuanced. And having been friends with the real Don and the real Buck, absolutely love how they were. Well, the stuff with Breaking Point with Buck is not exactly
Yeah, I've heard this. Yeah,
completely true to life.
but
But
it's
I did like showing the impact of the loss of your friends.
yes,
Um, and again, as we go through these episodes, I know it sounds a little preachy. These are not documentaries; they
no,
are entertainment.
yes,
And entertainment will oftentimes only imitate a life, not
hmm,
completely reproduce it. So
exactly.
just got to keep that in mind as you watch these episodes, and
Yes,
they are fantastic television. They really did a fantastic job.
yeah,
I mean, just look at the depth and the detail in
hmm,
the sets at the pottery scenes. I mean, everything down from the parachutist first aid kits and the pads on the shoulder straps, guys with the crickets. They're reading the Ike letter. They're reading the Night of Night. This what it's called, the Sync letter. Um, these are all, it's just really beautiful
Yeah.
details. And if our listeners and viewers don't know, like some of the C-47s in the background, those are flat. They were
Mm,
painted, they're perspective
yeah.
paintings and cut out that if you shoot them at a certain angle, they look 3D.
Yeah. We see that
But you
in
would never know it because I think what do they only have about six C-47s for
no.
the production? I
Oh gosh,
I
I
think it
don't know.
was it three or six? I can't remember. But a lot of
Mm.
those C-47s you see in the background of the airfield are
Yeah, it's the same.
um,
We see that in Memphis Belle. They use the same trick in Memphis Belle. They
yeah,
use the same trick in Masters of the Air. Obviously, yes, in Masters of the Air, they did have two fully full base 17 replicas, but also as well because they also had those, well, those flat pink painted B-17s as well. Because obviously you want to look at it, this is an airfield. But yeah, I think episode one is a fantastic episode. We get introduced to a lot of the guys that we are going to see throughout the series. We see that Rick Gomez is a cheeky chappy who is
yeah.
the
He's
clown.
the
You
clown,
know,
the
we are
walking, talking morale of Easy Company, as I like
yeah.
to call them. Yeah,
We
and
meet we see the relationship between Nixon and Winters, Nixon, sorry, and also Harry Welsh as well. We see Buck Compton and how he is, and his relationship with the guys. I think we just introduced to a lot of great characters, and it's just enough to say, hey, this is who we are, and we've spoken about this before, and I remember the first time I watched Band of Brothers, I mean, blinking heck, there's only 20 blokes in this company, it's just, but you read the book and you see a lot more, and you start to pick up on a lot more. So it's, yeah, great, if you are new to it, read the book, follow up and just read the book, and then go
yeah,
back and watch the series, and you will pick up on a lot more. And certainly when I watched this 23 years ago, BBC One or BBC Two, sorry, as a BBC One or BBC Two. Anyway, um, I didn't have the book. I knew it was based on a book, but I hadn't read it. I wasn't much of a reader then, so I was never going to read it at that time. Watched it, I was absolutely captivated by Band of Brothers. And then when I joined the RAF, I came out of training. I got on box set on DVD box set. Watched it again. I read the book soon after, and I just remember just going back to watch it again and just picking up on everything. Whoa, whoa, whoa! I didn't. So and so didn't do that. That didn't
yeah.
happen. This happened to this guy. This happened to this guy.
There's
And
so many little
so much
details. Like look,
amazing detail.
as they're beginning to load up, and this is a beautiful culmination of the episode where they get to the point where everything now falls by the wayside as they start to load up, right? The seriousness of the
Hmm.
situation. When Meehan comes over and shakes Winter's hand, and he starts to help each one of the men of his stick up, and he puts his the infamous leg bag, up into the aircraft. They start to load, and then they take off, and the music becomes so
Mm,
majestic as they launch, and it is the perfect
yeah.
stop point,
Yes. And
right?
even a great time to put this as well. But before we finish, Simon Pegg's face. I think we see that in episode two or the start, but you see the fear as well. But yes,
Yeah, yeah.
of what's to
Um,
come.
Yeah, so I think we're at a good stop point for it. I hope we gave everybody their money's worth on this one, because we owed you a little bit because we missed our drop on Sunday. So you got an hour and a half on this one, which I think is I think we paid our debt a little bit. And again, for everybody, just if you're interested in becoming a member of the company, you want to be a paid subscriber, we're on Patreon. You'll find our pod on Spotify, YouTube, Buzzsprout. You can find Leighton if you're interested in maybe getting involved in trying to get some signatures from some of the cast members. You can look them up on Currahee Signings. You can find me at Military History Research and Publishing. I've got my own website. If you're interested in taking a tour with me, I do a 2 week Easy Company tour every year in September. We start in Normandy and we finish in Munich. And we stop in all of the big places except for Hagenau is the only place we don't stop because it's just out of the way. But we hit everything else, including we're one of only 5 tour companies that have access to the actual fields at Breakcore Manor. So if you're interested in traveling and taking a 2 week tour, we have very competitive prices, and I look forward to hearing from you. Leighton looks forward to hearing from you if you want to get in on Currahee signings. Anything else to sign before we sign off?
No, that's all. No, it's great episode. Yeah, really, that flew by. Yeah, almost an hour and a half of chit chatting. But yeah, like I said, I'll look to get this uploaded as ASAP. Um, and for you, but no, I really appreciate you listening, and please support us if you can, just to keep the lights on and doing more of this.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Great talking to you guys.
Thank you.
We'll see you next one.
Thanks, bye.